Even if maybe the history of the dog in the shelter is actually not bad history,
Right.
what kind of happens through the shelter process, these dogs really just kind of have a rougher start and kind of automatically come with baggage regardless of where they came from.
Welcome to another episode of the Crunchy Carnivore Podcast. I'm Jessica Levy, holistic veterinarian, and this is Melissa Weidenhammer, certified canine nutritionist and holistic breeder. In this episode, we're going to talk about what special considerations you might have for when you get your dog from a rescue. So we've talked a lot about the natural rearing process and looking for the naturally reared puppy and doing everything holistically and maybe getting a puppy that's already been started off in that direction. But sometimes we get dogs from other places.
And I think it's probably a lot more common, to get a puppy or a dog from a situation that is not that. And it can look like a lot of different things. But when you are of a more holistic mindset, or coming to the table wanting to do things holistically or naturally this time because maybe you had a bad experience with a dog last time and you really feel passionate about rescue. Once you understand these principles and kind of how important it is to have that solid foundation in all the ways that we talk about, and you take on a puppy from a shelter or you take on, a dog from a rescue, we want to be very clear about what that means, what that looks like, because it is not the clean slate that you would get if you were to get a puppy from a natural rearing breeder.
Right, because when you get a puppy from an NR breeder, they're already prepared in many ways. They're already eating raw food. They've already had, their intestinal microbiome cultivated. And so you're just kind of picking up from there and going on with it. But when you get a dog from different sources, you're the one who ideally is going to start them on the road to health and start that gut healing process. And we've all done this. I've gotten plenty of dogs from rescues. I've picked up plenty of strays. One of my dogs was returned to a breeder and she gave him to me. I've had dogs dropped at my door on their way to, otherwise they'd be euthanized. I had a dog that I got on Craigslist. And so, and you've had dogs also from similar sources.
The dog that forever changed everything. We got her as a puppy, but she was from a very neglected, bad situation with her litter mates. And so, by the time we got her, she had already been through a lot of trauma, and of course was conventionally raised. So there was, because of that tech just pitched in and helped take care of, just to find them homes, which bless her heart. I mean, I'm grateful every day that she did that. So, it can be, basically we want to talk about that you don't know the history sometimes, and even if maybe the history of the dog in the shelter is actually not bad history.
Right.
What kind of happens through the shelter process, these dogs really just kind of have a rougher start and kind of automatically come with baggage regardless of where they came from, and then of course where they came from can bring with it a whole lot of issues as well.
Right, and I think that's just very typical of shelters and rescues. There's going to be basically an assembly line process. So all the dogs will get these vaccines at these intervals. If they're not spayed and neutered, they're going to be spayed and neutered.
Regardless of age.
Yeah. Yep. And sometimes regardless of health condition. And then, basically the goal is to find them homes as quickly as possible. They're going to have some sort of flea and tick preventive applied. They may have been treated for heartworm disease by the rescue or the shelter. They may have been treated for respiratory infections or diarrhea. So there's basically a lot that goes on with these dogs in a fairly short time. and then we bring them home.
And it's really like, it's understandable why they have this process, and it's understandable what their main goal is. And so, we're not trying to paint shelters or rescues as anything, like, they're great and they serve an immense purpose and value to dog lovers everywhere. But this is just the reality of the process, right? And so, when, you have all of these different factors, especially regardless of age. I mean, we hear about puppies being spayed or neutered at 10 weeks old. I mean, that is just so early, and comes by itself with it a tremendous amount of issues. So,
And I think, we're in Minnesota, which is a very dog-loving, dog-oriented state. I don't know if every state in the union is like this, but there is a constant flood of dogs. We have rescues here that go to Missouri and shop at the puppy mill auctions and rescue those dogs. There are groups that are constantly bringing in dogs from kill shelters in southern states. I mean, it's amazing how many dogs arrive in this state that are not purchased from breeders, but are brought in. I mean, the rescues here do a tremendous job. And then we still have the occasional pet store that actually sells puppies and kittens. So I had one in yesterday. One of my clients bought a new puppy from one of our local pet stores. And the thing with those two, at least in this state, and I think it is a national law, that breeders cannot sell directly to pet stores. And so those puppies, the pet store has to purchase them from dealers who purchase them from breeders.
oh, wow.
And so there's this whole network. Those puppies have gone through a lot of stress because, of course, the pet store wants to get them as young as possible so that you can sell a young puppy. There's a lot that happens to them in a short period of time.
And so, it really does lend itself to, you kind of have, one of two types of people that end up taking in these kind of rescue cases, which again, it can be anything from you rescued a dog off the side of the road to a shelter or foster situation. Or maybe you did buy it from a breeder, but it wasn't the best situation. And so you're kind of rescuing the puppy from a breeder. I mean, that happens all the time too. So rescue can look like a lot of different things. But usually you've got either kind of two types of homes. You've got a kind of temporary foster home that's going to hold these animals until they're rehabilitated or ready, or there's a proper home found for them to be placed in, or you're going to be that you want that as your pet, and so you're going to be the forever home for this particular animal. And so what we want to do is we kind of want to lay out expectations and kind of maybe recommendations for if you, whichever person you are, maybe what you can do, or what we would recommend you do from a holistic standpoint, and also kind of just setting expectations, because you are getting an animal that's had just kind of a rougher go before they've gotten to you.
And we covered this in one of our podcast interview episodes where we interviewed Air Gustafson, and she actually did this. So she adopted a dog from, I think Zephyr came from a shelter, and really had it beautifully planned out how to, how to incorporate her into the household.
Integrate, I don't know.
Integrate, that's what I meant. Yes. And then Air's already a raw feeder, so she had this whole thing planned, how to get Zephyr onto raw food as quickly as possible and move through those things. So that's an episode definitely worth watching, because that dog did have some issues and she was able to restore her health.
So let's talk first about kind of if you're a foster. If you're kind of a temporary foster home, you're most likely going to be linked to a rescue organization, and what that could look like, and really what to expect, and kind of what you're what you're looking at there is, is being able to maybe really start to build some health into this animal, even though maybe you may not have them for a very long time.
Right, and that kind of depends on the rules and regulations of the rescue organization. Some organizations are, move dogs in and out pretty quickly, and so the foster may feel that you don't have very much time with this dog, so why go to the trouble of switching it to raw food, and then you don't know if the person who adopts it is going to feed it something else. Maybe they don't want to feed it raw food. And so, there might not be a whole lot of continuity in the type of holistic care that you would prefer to give a dog. Maybe they're not going to get that in the next home that they go to. I always think about those that if you can give the dog better health for the few weeks that you have it, why wouldn't you just kind of give it that jump start? And then, maybe it would be healthier when it goes to the next person. I think that would be a good thing. But some rescues won't let you do that. Some of them are quite strict about having to feed the food that the rescue wants you to use, or
have it be within certain guidelines.
Right, or do like the medical plan that the rescue has in place. And so that might be the responsibility of the foster. I have clients who foster for, I think it's Can Do Canines. This organization breeds their own service dogs, and then they train them and then, gift them to people who need service dogs.
That's amazing.
Yeah, so they foster for them, and so their own dog is raw fed, but they are not allowed to feed the foster dog raw food because it's going to be fed kibble, even though they have this dog for a year or something like that. And then they have, they have to do all this training with the foster dog. I mean, these are dedicated fosters.
Well, and
I love these dogs.
Yeah, I had the privilege, and I think you went out too. You helped with the temperament testing.
Oh, yeah.
For a Great Dane rescue here in Minnesota. What a fun experience that was. So Dr. Levy got to go out and help perform temperament testing for a litter of puppies that came in with one of the Great Danes.
I think there were 10 of them.
There was 10 of them.
Oh my gosh, and they were all different colors. It was so great.
They were really, really cute.
And the mother dog was super sweet.
I think before that you had really only helped do that with my litters, and so it was kind of cool to have all of that done with a different breed. And I kind of pitched in and helped, how to interpret the results and things like that. So I also got to go out there and kind of be a part of that. But what an amazing group of people. And, she's a great example too. Like, they raw feed their other Great Danes, but they have to stay, especially with these puppies, they had to stay within certain parameters. They love using homeopathy for immunization, but they have to adhere to certain guidelines. And so I think, again, this is one of those topics that we would love to bring some unity and dissolve some division about. This idea about, rescues versus breeders, and, rescues are kind of awful because they do everything traditional. That needs to stop, because everybody has the same goal. Everybody is in there for the love of the animals and doing the best that they can with what they've been given. So, but most of the time, if you're kind of a temporary foster and you're working with a rescue, a lot of times your hands are kind of tied. But sometimes there's more freedom within that. And so kind of to go along with what Dr. Levy is saying, I think it would be easy for someone to maybe think, oh, I'm only going to have this animal for maybe a month or 2 months. I don't want to go, is it really worth me going to the trouble of transitioning to raw food and doing all this if they're just going to go to a home that's not going to do these things? Yes. We would say that yes, it's absolutely worth that, because you're giving that animal the absolute best for that time being, and it may just be the thing that, that nourishment and all of that may just be exactly what they need at that particular time. So if you're in a situation where you're a temporary foster and you do have some flexibility within what you're allowed to do, and you are more holistically minded and wanting to really kind of pour into that animal while you have them, there's certainly a relatively quick and easy gut reset protocol that we suggest people do when they transition from kibble to raw. And this is really This is good for, puppies, adults, it doesn't matter. Whether they're, maybe in pretty good shape, or, maybe they're struggling a little bit, to do kind of this gut reset protocol. I mean, it really only takes, I think, 2 weeks. Is the full gut reset to transition to raw period, if you want to take that much time to do that. So, I mean, you can do a lot of good in a week or two.
Yeah.
With just that gut reset, and then maybe having a food on hand that is a little bit more easy to digest, but more in the fresh food camp. So like a freeze dried, or maybe a commercially made raw food that's been through a sanitization process. It's gonna be easier on the gut, something like that.
So the gut reset that you can do, it's very simple. So it involves basically 4 different supplements: 4-leaf rover organ care, 4-leaf rover protect, standard process canine enteric support, and standard process canine immune system support. And those things all work together to help restore the gut lining and combat some of the difficulties that these dogs often have. Again, just because of having been through the assembly line process without a whole lot of individual attention to their health needs. There's a gut reset guide that is on the holistic care intro that is part of one of the guidelines that we offer. It is free. It's going to be linked below. And then it's a different scenario if you're going to keep the dog and plan on having it long term.
So things that we've kind of seen with people when they take in a rescue is that a lot of this kind of assembly line procedure type thing is done, and they bring the animal home, and the animal has like 0 problems when they bring it home, and they seem to be fine in the shelter. But then they get a month or 2 in, and then all of a sudden they start seeing issues where maybe chronic diarrhea, or ear infections, or they can't keep food down, or whatever it is. All of a sudden itchiness. What we want to set the expectation that it's kind of like when this amount of drugs, chemicals, processes is done on an animal all at once, it's kind of like dropping a bomb on them. And it takes a little bit of time sometimes for the dust to settle from that bomb going off, and then you start seeing the issues show up. And so it's very common for someone to bring a rescue home from a shelter or something like that, and it seems perfectly fine and perfectly healthy, and then you get a month or 2 months in, and all of a sudden you start to having these issues. And so it's really just best to understand that you're getting yourself into a situation that you're going to need to do some repair. You're going to need to do some damage control. And so the sooner you can do that, regardless of whether you see a problem, the better off you and your animal are going to be. And then to not be shocked or surprised when 4 to 8 weeks down the road, all of a sudden problems start to show up.
Right, because a lot of times people think, is there something wrong with us? Is there something wrong with our house? What did we do? You did not cause this. This is due to things that happened to this dog before, and it's just starting to manifest. And this is something I've seen a ton of. So like itching is a big one that people see. And so you can hopefully prep for that by doing things more naturally for the dog as soon as you get it into your home.
So some of the things to prepare for, these things are almost always going to cause some form of inflammation, and that can look like a lot of different things, okay? But some form of inflammation. If you're getting a young animal that has gone through this process, there's going to be a delay in growth plate closure, which sets you up for higher risk risk for injuries or skeletal issues. You're certainly going to have a much higher risk of cancer with this particular animal. That is just the way of it. You're also going to have hormonal dysregulation, which we're learning more and more all the time is a huge factor in their overall health, let alone then, how they behave is affected by removing those sex organs, so you could have some behavioral issues, even if the dog or the animal did not have behavioral issues before they went in the shelter. They can come out through all of these processes and procedures that are done. And so we're not trying to paint the picture of doom and gloom, but just a realistic expectation. You've got probably a lot coming on your hands to deal with. And so the sooner you can kind of, like Air did, have a plan. If you're going to take in an animal like this, we're not saying don't take in the animal, but just be prepared and have some sort of a plan, maybe have some supplements and food on hand so that you're ready to really start rallying around their health through their gut and their nourishment, and just be prepared that this is probably going to be a journey.
Mm-hmm. And some rescue dogs come through with flying colors, and I've seen amazing things happen. I've seen rescue dogs live a very long time and completely restore their health. Obviously, it depends on the individual dog's genetics, but it can be done. So we're not trying to doom and gloom and say, oh my gosh, you better think twice about this. I think it's legit no matter where you get the dog from. But it's worth just being prepared and getting started as soon as possible, even though when you bring your rescue dog home, it might look great.
So for somebody who's bringing in an animal and you are the forever home, it's the beginning of the journey is similar to what we would recommend for somebody who's fostering. You again, the very first step is going to be that gut reset. You're going to just do so much to help the immune system, prepare the gut for fresh food. It's really just step number one. Have that gut reset protocol on hand. Just have the supplements ready and be ready to go. And then, you can either, if the animal is not really struggling at that point, we would say absolutely just, do the transition from kibble to raw process that we have in our guide. We have it in the free holistic intro guide, and we also have it in our Raise 'em on Raw guide. So if you want to learn better how to kind of understand the foundations of raw feeding, it's in that as well. We'll link both of those below, of course. And so that would be kind of our recommendation would be, we want that gut reset on board and then to move into raw feeding as quickly as possible. However, there's a caveat to that. If you are bringing in an animal that is already struggling, they are already severely itchy, having diarrhea, they're struggling in some way, we really like to use that gut reset protocol, but sticking with you'll see part of what we ask you to use is raw goat's milk as just an introduction. I have had clients who have dogs that are in this situation. They will literally just feed raw goat milk with the supplements for 3-4 days. The reason that we choose that is because it's the most balanced and highly digestible food that you can possibly give, and it's liquid, so it's very, very easy to move through the system. And so doing raw goat's milk with the gut reset protocol for the first 4 or 5 days, they're getting fat, protein, electrolytes, naturally occurring digestive enzymes, probiotics. They're going to absolutely be nourished, but in the most gentle way possible, and it gives you a wonderful vehicle for the supplements to go through and really see if that doesn't right the ship a little bit and help ease kind of some of their discomfort before you would maybe move into a raw food. You can also choose a commercially made raw food versus a straight raw food. We've talked about that in other episodes. We can link that one at the end of this video as well. But you can find truly raw food, which has not been through any type of sanitization process, and then you can get commercially made raw food that has been through a sanitization process. It's gotten rid of all the bacteria, pathogens, all the things. Well, an animal that's more compromised, that's a way to give them fresh food while you're building that healthy gut microbiome so that they're going to have an easier time assimilating to that new diet, and you're not going to have as much difficulty doing that. So that's key in step number one is getting that gut reset online in whichever way is best for that animal, depending on how they come to you, and then getting them on fresh food as quickly as possible in the way that is going to be best for them.
So at the same time, while you're trying to rehabilitate this dog's intestinal tract, the microbiome, feed them a fresh diet, it's also your responsibility to not further poison them. So flea and tick chemicals should be avoided. There are plenty of natural options to choose from. Cancel your lawn care unless it's organic. You have to think about chemicals in the home. Like, you might want to revisit what you use to clean with. And if you were going to get a new couch, you're going to get new carpeting, maybe hold off, because those things will off-gas some pretty toxic chemicals. There's often, I think, a lot of fear about, but what do we do about, we got to keep him from getting fleas. We don't want him to get ticks. Again, there are so many natural options that are 100% safe. And those things they're not hard to find, they're not hard to do. We have a guide to those things as well. Another thing that I was thinking about is that the dog may have already been started on some sort of course of treatment for diarrhea, for respiratory infection, for whatever. And so it's helpful to already know ahead of time who the holistic vets are in your area, and maybe get your new friend into a holistic vet as soon as possible. And then, maybe find other things that will support their body while you're proceeding or not proceeding. Obviously, once you purchase the dog, it's up to you with the conventional treatment plan.
So first, we would obviously say gut reset. Get them on fresh food as quickly as you possibly can. Make sure you're avoiding those chemicals, in and around your home. Whatever you're putting on the dog should be natural, no chemicals, because we don't want to burden their system already, even more. They're already compromised in a lot of ways. The next thing that we would add to this list is glandular support. So, if an animal has been fully spayed or neutered, that is a big piece of their health that is going to be affected, and it's it's not the end all be all, but to get a really good beef organ supplement that has gender specific reproductive organ in that supplement is going to do a lot to help support your dog internally, and so some type of a glandular support in that way. I know Standard Process has a couple of really good ones, one specifically for male, one for female, Simplex F and Simplex M, I believe. And so that's a good option. Otherwise, I've used just really good organic grass-fed beef organ supplements, and you can find some that are gender specific. So something like that, just to give an example of what we mean when we say glandular support. And then there's certainly the body work conversation. So, if you can locate a good animal massage therapist, animal chiropractor, really working on manipulating their body that way can be tremendously helpful, especially for their nervous system, let alone, the physiological part of it. So.
Right, and those practitioners can also point out to you if the dog doesn't stand normally or doesn't bear even weight on all its legs, or if it, has a sloppy sit. Those are things that I would start working pretty quickly to correct. We kind of tend to forget that our legs are also connected to the rest of our body. And so how we bend our spine and how we use our spine is going to affect nerve function to all the internal organs. So taking care of those things is not necessarily like, if there's time at the end, you want to get onto it pretty quickly because it will affect organ function.
So once these things have kind of been put in place and checked off on your list, and you're kind of well on your way with your dog, it's maybe been a month or two, then there are certainly other supplements along with the balanced raw diet that would be really, really good to do for an animal that has been compromised in this way. We say to wait because you're already doing a lot. And a big part of kind of our philosophy is we want to do things gently to support the system. If you try and do too much too fast, a lot of us we get in that mode where we're trying to, we get this animal and we feel this emotional pull, like I want to know that I'm doing everything I possibly can, to help them and all the things. You're already doing a ton, but it needs to be metered and paced to a degree, or what's going to happen is you're going to do too much too fast. Those detox mechanisms are going to come online and they're going to over detox. It's going to go way too, and they're going to be really uncomfortable. And so, just doing the gut reset with the fresh food on the front end and keeping the chemicals off is a tremendous amount. And that is going to take a little time for their body to get used to and settle into that. And there's a whole process to that already. So once you've kind of got that underway, you feel like they've settled in and kind of become part of your family, and you've got kind of all these different things, and there's this kind of rhythm, calm, stabilization, then there's extra support that you can do supplement-wise for an animal like this. And again, we like to rotate supplements. We don't like to give the same supplement every day. You're kind of doing these as a rotation, just kind of like as almost like a steady drip, not every single day. So some of the really great things that you could implement would be something like a green-lipped mussel oil. It's extremely high in omega-3s, and so whatever type of inflammation that they may be battling, or that may be happening under the surface you don't see yet, that's one of your biggest kind of fighters of inflammation is going to be your omega-3s as a supplement. There's some really good foods that we would say to use too, but that's kind of just part of our recommendation for a balanced raw diet, is there's really good omega-3s in there already. So green lip mussel is just that extra boost of omega-3s above and beyond if you've got an animal that's been more compromised like that. And then I know, Dr. Levy, you're a big proponent of collagen. So can you talk a little bit about collagen?
I use it a lot for structural issues, but it also will help lubricate the joints, and so it is very helpful for older animals as well. It kind of helps rejuvenate them, and it actually helps reduce inflammation. And so if there is itching, if there is any indication that there might be some sort of infection going on, or excess earwax or something like that, that's where I would use collagen.
So if, because I know this is where a lot of people will go, because this is where my brain went when you first brought up collagen to me. I was like, oh, what kind? What kind? Where do I find it? Yeah. So what would be, just when somebody is looking for a good collagen, kind of what are your parameters?
Well, I like to see as many different types of collagen as possible. So some of the collagen supplements made for dogs have only type 2 collagen, or they have types 1 and type 3. And you want, like the latest as I saw one that said, now with 9 different types of collagen. Yes, get that one. And then it should be from an animal source. There are collagen supplements made from plant sources or coral for vegans. But what you really want is collagen that is beef-based, bison-based, marine collagen. Those are going to be better absorbed by dogs because they're carnivores. And something that we've been learning about more recently is the fecal microbiome transplant. And so happy news, it comes in capsules. The one that we're just starting to experiment with is made by Animal Biome. They have fecal microbiome transplant capsules. And of course you want the one specifically that is made from raw-fed dogs, because their basic model is not. And basically, this is a supplement made from the feces of very healthy raw-fed dogs that have a balanced microbiome. And so you feed it to your dog in order to reset the intestinal microbiome population. And that will really help a lot of these dogs recover from chronic inflammation, autoimmune diseases, things like that. And I would say, probably a couple of months I would plan for. It's not something that you do for the rest of their life. It's kind of a process that you take them through, and then you're done when things are better. You can always have their microbiome tested to see if it has become balanced by doing this, and Animal Biome offers that as well.
So we've hopefully given you some understanding, maybe setting some expectations you didn't realize that you needed to have when moving into bringing home an animal like this, and really, just to kind of piggyback on what Dr. Levy was saying about, please understand that when you bring home this animal and they're fine, and then 2 months later they're not fine, this is a slow burn that it's all happening under the surface and you're just not seeing it show up until a little bit later. I think it's really hard for us to connect something when it doesn't happen right after the event. And that's one of the things that we try and teach, is that, these things that we, really like to find alternatives for, they don't necessarily show up in a bad way immediately. And I think that's part of what makes them so damaging, is because people don't connect, or veterinarians don't connect that it could have just taken a little while for this problem to show up from this event. Just because it didn't happen within 24 hours doesn't mean, some of these things can build up over time. And so, again, just kind of be ready for some of these things to show up, and realize that it could have been from something that happened a couple of months ago, that's what you're seeing. And that we've hopefully given you some really good starter points to help really rally around these animals right when you bring them home. You can kind of have these few things in place. You can have a plan and kind of this should get you 3 to 6 months into their journey easy, just with the things that we've kind of shared with you to do here. I will also say that, some animals will have lifelong issues. That can be talked about in a later conversation. There are further things that can be done. There are deeper detox protocols that can be done. There are more ways to support an animal who's been fully spayed or neutered. We are just now really learning the lifetime effects over their entire well-being about full spay and neuter, and there are ways that we are really starting to find holistic protocols and methods about how to best support animals in that situation. I have one. And so there's going to be a hormone health guide that we're going to be coming out with here in the next couple of months, and maybe you're watching this and it's already out. You can certainly check our website to see if it's available, but we give really some good information in this, and also some holistic protocols to support these animals throughout their lifetime. I'm putting things in practice that I will do every single day for the rest of Gemma's life because I need to support her system in a different way, because she is fully spayed. So just know that there's more to this conversation than what we're just talking about in these first steps. But again, we need to lay the foundation. We need to create a stable, healthy, environment and foundation before we can maybe do some of these, deeper things or more intensive things. We really just kind of need to set the stage anyway. And so that's really what we wanted to give everybody, was just a really good kind of, here's how to build a foundation, or here's how to best help that animal while you do have them for 2 months before you send them off. They're only going to be better off for doing those things. Right. So we'll link plenty of resources down in the description box below, and we'll certainly probably come back around and talk about some of these deeper, more intensive things that you can do later on. But we just really want to make sure that people don't dive into those things too quickly. So we're going to kind of space out our information a little bit before we start talking about those extra things that you can do. So I pray that this was insightful and helpful for everybody that's watching this, whether you've had a rescue, or you're thinking about getting a rescue, or maybe you have a dog now that you are raising holistically, but you're seeing certain things. All of these that we're talking about are helpful in a lot of those situations. And so, Dr. Levy, do you have any final thoughts before we close this episode?
I still would not hesitate to get a puppy or a dog from a rescue or a shelter or something like that. I mean, that's one of those things where when you find the dog that's yours, there is that kind of, sometimes it's love at first sight. And so, these things are something to think about, but just with that awareness, you can get started as soon as possible, instead of kind of waiting to see what damage has been done and what the fallout's going to be.
Thank you so much for joining us. Our goal is always to encourage others to seek out the holistic approach by way of education and empowerment. You can check out our online resources at wellspringhaa.com. You can follow us on our YouTube channel, Wellspring Holistic Animal Academy, and you can also find us on Instagram at wellspring_HAA. We hope that this has been helpful and that you continue with us on your journey to holistic health for your pets. As always, we're here to be unapologetically all natural.